Hey everyone, Chan here and welcome to my channel. Now, for today's video, I want it to be more of a summary slash mind dump kind of video. Now, in the past few videos, I've introduced different studying strategies that I feel would make a study session more effective and efficient. Now, can one actually implement all of them? I'm not entirely sure. I try my best to implement as much as I can. However, it might not be feasible. So, for today's video, I'm going to talk about the general structure of how I would go about studying, my justification on which strategy I'm using and why I'm doing it a specific way that works for me, right? Your job is to find one that works for you. Certain things that I do might work, certain things might not. Then you play around with it, change variations, either time, intervals, whatsoever. Whatever works for you best, you know yourself, right? Now, here's the other thing. I didn't come to all of these different strategies all at once. So I just slowly implement portions and portions and portions into my studying strategy. So this study strategy is basically a Frankenstein monster, right? So I'm going to try to justify as much as I can. Hopefully it's not as confusing as maybe it actually sounds to me, but we'll see. All right, so first and foremost, before anything, I would always try to go into what I call more preparatory work, right? And I've mentioned previously that it's best to review or see a specific topic 3 times. It could be from the same source 3 times, or it could be from different sources, different variations, right? It could be from textbooks, it could be from videos, it could be from audios. However you find different exposure works best. Now, this preparatory work is dependent on how you want to, how do I say this, chunk different topics. Now, the preparatory work is simple. For me, I would look at a topic and I want to see how many subcategories or subtopics, vocabularies, concepts are part of that topic, right? So what I would do is I would, of course, review stuff like the table of contents. Those are usually pretty good in terms of, and I misspelled, table of content. They're pretty good in terms of breaking down into structures and then substructures, especially in textbooks and workbooks, right? Of course, I look at the different just topics or categories in general within each chapter or different groups of chapters. It depends on the textbooks. Some group several chapters at once as one overarching topic. Some are just chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter. Right, so I look at the topics. Of course, there's subtopics. I would also briefly look through, because at least with the textbooks and stuff now, it's really good at highlighting or differentiating certain topics or sub-concepts or vocabulary. So definitely look at those just to have a general idea of what is expected in that subject. If it is Algebra 2, then all the different vocabularies, all the different topics of Algebra 2, even something that's not math related or like IT certifications or programming, right? Look at different subtopics and how they are categorized with each other. So that's the preparatory work, just to basically understand the framework of how I'm going to go about trying to understand and I guess make sense of the material. Now, the other thing is that while I'm going through each and every one of them, and I'm skimming some of the chapters as well, some of the topics as well, just to have a general idea of questions of maybe do I understand this at all? Does this make absolutely no sense? Or maybe I've seen this before, where have I seen it and in under what context? So this is actually the bulk of what we really want to do first, right? We want to prepare before we just start mindlessly going, which is ironic, mindlessly going on studying, right? So we're going to prepare, we're going to try to understand the structure of the material and then going in depth. What do we know? What do we don't know? What do we maybe know, maybe need to review more of? And from there, we develop a study plan. Now, at that point, this is where you chunk it into different, I guess you could say, chunks, groups, right? So, you know the whole, like, people have a hard time remembering numbers in past, groups of 4 and so on and so forth. It's the same thing with chunks, right? You want to study the materials in smaller chunks that are closely related to each other. So you can chunk maybe 1, 2 to even 3 chapters together if they are relevant, okay? So you chunk them into different sections. So let's just do that, and hopefully that makes a little more sense. Now, why do I want to chunk it? Because when I chunk it, I can actually start developing a study schedule. So my study schedule usually depends on the deadline. So like for some of the topics I had to learn, I only had 6 months. Or when I went into some of my online, I guess you could say college degree, where you sort of have a time limit, or the quicker you can finish a class, the quicker you can understand a material, the less you have to pay, right? So you can set yourself the deadline. And of course, some of you guys, you have your midterm finals, you don't have a fixed deadline you can't really do anything about. So that will determine basically how many study intervals you would have in a day. Now, normally I break up the intervals into 2 segments. I would have the daytime and the evening. The daytime is when I'm studying new materials. New materials, or materials that require me to be more analytical, trying to make sense of things. Even if I've seen it before and it's like a hardcore detail-oriented review, I would keep it around the daytime. Evening is more just straight up review. Review and sometimes just practice problem. Practice problem. Now, the reason for that is because what I found worked for me is I operate a lot better in the daytime. When in the daytime, I'm looking at new materials, I comprehend more, I can process and make sense of it more. By evening, I'm usually pretty tired, but I don't want to give up that time just yet before I go to bed or whatever I'm going to do for the evening, right? I still want to get some studying in, so instead of trying to cram new materials, which I know I'm probably going to forget or not make sense of, I'd rather just try to recall material that I either learned on the daytime, right, as review, or even just like the day or night before, like a topic beforehand, right? This is all straight up practice problem, and review is what I usually use the evening time for. And of course, different study session, however many study session you want, that's entirely up to you. Now, my study session itself consists of basically sort of hour intervals. The way it works is that I would have 45 minutes, and this is based on the concept of Pomodoro, right? The original Pomodoro is 25 minutes. I find that 25 minutes is a little too short because by the time I really get into studying, it's almost near the end and it kind of throws me off. So I find that 45 minutes of studying works best for me. And then after that, it's sort of diminishing return. You start losing your focus, you start losing your concentration, right? It's just not working. So I would do a 15-minute break afterwards. So that's each of my study sessions. Okay, the break itself, remember, it has to be an actual legitimate break. So it's not like I'm doing these math concepts, this math problem, and then I go and I sit and it's my break, but I'm still thinking about it. No, you have to do something completely different so that you take your mind off that topic completely. So go for a run, go for a hike, do something, play video games, who knows, right? Eat. Just as long as you are able to completely take your mind off of that topic so that your mind can actually come back for your next study session with a fresh start. So this is my study session. And on a given day, I try to get at least 2, just 1 in the daytime and 1 in the evening. And sometimes I would do more. Okay? Now, the study session, what do I do during those times? Well, there's 2 different things that I mainly do. First and foremost, if I'm introduced to new materials, I am going through the concept of materials at least 3 times. So the 3x exposure of material. Okay, and then afterwards I'm doing practice problems. Now, practice problem, I could be sitting down and actually just completely solving the practice problem, which I feel like is the best if you have the option, right? However, there are times where closer to evening, actually more late afternoon, evening, where I do have small chunks of time that I could do studying, but I don't have the option of sitting down in a desk, bringing out scratch paper, bringing out the textbook, and then working through a problem completely. And that's why I introduced the 2 different methods that I normally would use. You have your mental reading. Just right here, it's getting unorganized already. Mental reading, and then the mental reverse reading. Reading. There you go. Okay, so those 2 are supplements to doing practice problem when I don't have the option of sitting down and actually doing the practice problem. If I do, I definitely always opt for more of a practice problem kind of approach. Now, there are other ones that I am slowly incorporating, and I think works really well, and it's using the concept of Richard Feynman. They call it the Feynman technique. I actually don't even know how to spell his name. Feynman technique. And the idea is that his concept, if you truly understand something, you have to be able to explain it. So using the Feynman technique, what I found to be useful is being able to explain the concept to myself, right? Or instead of, looking like a crazy person, have a action figure and talking to him, right? What I do is I would write summary pages. I try to cram it on to like 1 or 2 pages, I guess you could say 1 page front and back, right? So I would try to summarize the topic as much as possible, basically mind dump all the topics that I've learned, how they are related to each other, what are some key formulas, key concepts that I have to pay attention to, and how that plays a key role into solving those kind of problems. So that's how I normally go about my study session. Now, the idea is up to you in terms of, this is where I spend the bulk of my time, just making sure I prepare for it. Then I built a structure that's convenient for my day, right? If this doesn't work, if 45 minutes doesn't work, go down to 40, go down to 35, go down to 25, go down to 20. It's up to you, right? But the idea is you have using the concept of Pomodoro and using the concept of Parkinson's, right? You want to be as focused as possible on the study session. That's the key here. These are all just strategies, different ways of approaching studying, but this one is the key, and it's built on the large structure of after preparatory work. Right now, one last thing I do want to mention after this. So you have all that, you have your studying, and then you have your different way of studying, and that is the fact that, well, after all this, all the practice problem, you still need one more. What was it again? All right, so I had to stop the camera because I was like trying to think, like, what was that one last thing? Because I knew all of this, but then there was one thing that I needed to tie it all together, and that was this right here, Anki. Now, Anki itself is not anything special, right? But the idea is that I needed to incorporate space review. So in case you guys didn't catch in the previous video, it's wonderful that we can study every single day the same topic and we're going to be super masters on it. Now, the only problem is that while it is effective, it's very inefficient, right? Especially if we have a lot of new materials that we have to learn. So we would use space review. And the idea is that after we learn a material, we tend to start forgetting it. But when we review a material, guess what? We reset the clock. And the key is that every time we review the material and we reset the clock, it takes a lot longer for us to start forgetting. So if you are learning a material, the first one, maybe you have to review the next day because you start forgetting key details, right? And after that, you might not have to review the day after. Maybe you can skip a day or two. And then from then on, eventually after 4, 5, 6 sessions, maybe you won't forget it until maybe a month or a month and a half in, right? So then all of a sudden you don't have to review it as frequently. And using that, that's why I resorted to Anki. Now, Anki is nothing more than sort of a vocabulary flashcard app, and its design is based on this remembering or forgetting principle, and it is wonderful. However, I don't really use it for vocabulary. I mean, it's good for it, but I use the feature that it differentiates the review to help me keep track, because I don't have the mental bandwidth to keep track of what I studied before and if I need to review it on this specific day or the other specific day. So the way it works is simple. You create a flashcard. And what you would do is every time you review a flashcard, you have 4 options, right? You have the card was easy, the card was medium, the card was hard, and it was like alien, completely like I didn't know or I don't recall at all, right? And based on your honest answer of how you dealt with that card, it will space out your review, whether if it's really hard or something you forgot or whatsoever, it's going to come back again pretty quickly. Whereas if you thought it was easy, it's going to space out pretty far. So you have to be honest with that. Now, what I would do is I would put in chunks for your flashcard. Now, what I mean by that is that I'm not putting out every single topic, all the vocabulary, everything on that flashcard. It just makes no sense. So what I would do is I would just make a very generic, very simple flashcard. So for example, my first flashcard is going to be chapters 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then from there on, that's how I would structure my study session. My daytime, if I've never touched chapter 1, 2, 3 before, guess what? That's new materials, right? One study session of chapters 1, 2, and 3. And most likely I won't cover all 1, 2, and 3. That means the next study session, the next day, I would have to continue with studying new materials. Now, the evening session is when I review the materials and I do practice problems of that material. So if I studied 1, 2, and 3 on the daytime, in the evening, I would do practice problem or I would review it. So after that, once I'm done with a specific chunk, a specific topic, or whatsoever, right, I would go into Anki. Was that easy, medium, or hard? And then based on what I answered that, well, guess what? I won't review that material until based on Anki, right? That flashcard shows up again and say, oh, chapters 1, 2, 3, or if it's a topic, quadratic formula, or whatever. And it shows up again, that's when I would review again. So Anki is more like sort of helping me keep track of when I should review. Now, there's my general structure, all right? And then it's probably a good idea to just do a brief summary of how everything works, at least for me. And then understand this. This is what works for me so far. I'm always changing this. Right? This is my current one. And every time I learn new materials that I find, or new studying strategies or techniques or whatsoever, and I get, gung-ho and trying to incorporate it, I'm going to change it up. So use this as a general guideline if you want to. If you have one that works for you, then forget all about it. Right? Incorporate whatever you feel like is useful. Throw away what you feel like is useless. Now, so let's just briefly summarize everything and see how it goes. First and foremost, before anything, I do a lot of the preparatory work. I check out the table of contents. I check out all the highlighted or important or boxed subtopics, topics, vocabularies, so on and so forth, and I start chunking it. Now, chunking it is entirely based on you. If you feel like you can gather more material at once, good. If not, then chunk it based on chapters, based on concepts, your choice, right? And so after I have all these individual chunks together, now I start devising my schedule, right? How long do I have to study for it? If I'm chasing a certificate, maybe it's a little fluid. If it's a midterm or a final exam or anything, then the deadline's pretty rigid. So from there, I start breaking down, all right, each day I should go over how many chunks or how many topics or whatsoever, just so that I can be roughly prepared by the deadline. Now, usually I try to leave a little buffer, maybe about a week or so. That's just gonna be dedicated to straight up study, straight up reviewing everything I can, just because, it gives me sort of a, how do I say this? A fallback plan in case I fall behind. So that's what I would do with preparatory work. That's the bulk of where I would focus in the beginning. And then after I have everything good and I have a schedule, then I start going into basically the actual individual studying. Now, my week in terms of studying is usually about 5 days. I try to have 5 days. I've tried 7 before, but then I burnt out pretty quickly. So I try 5 days, and I usually try to leave Saturday and Sunday just as break and buffer, because this is, remember, supposed to be a guide to help you study better. It's not supposed to be super rigid, and it's not supposed to create additional stress for you, right? So for example, if all of a sudden you have a study schedule and in the day you didn't finish all the chunks that you felt like you should have because you scheduled it that way, Saturday and Sunday, then it's a time for you to catch up, right? And if all of a sudden you overestimate how difficult it is and you have a lot of free time, well, great, that's even better. Saturday and Sunday, that's your break. Your mind shouldn't be reeling over the new materials. It should be relaxing, enjoying, spend time with family, friends, whatever you need to do, and then you go back again. So from then on, that's usually how my week is structured. Now my day, once again, is structured in daytime and nighttime or evening time. Daytime, all new materials if possible, right? Or at least review materials that I feel like are comprehensive, heavy, detailed heavy, whatsoever, because that just works for me. If it doesn't work for you, then switch it around. Evening is when I go through review practice. Now, inside review practice is like I am either re-looking, skimming the old materials, doing practice problems, so on and so forth. And so each and every one of those are broken down into study sessions, right? I try to do at least 2 a day. Sometimes I do more if I have more free time, or I feel like it's a time crunch and I need to get more in. Study sessions. You have 45 minutes studying, 15 minutes break. That's for me. If it doesn't work for you, either go up or go down, right? Go down to 40 minutes, 35, 30 minutes, so on and so forth. And then from then on, actually in the study session, I usually use a variation of some of these guys right here, right? I will either expose myself to the material 3 times if I haven't done that already. I will do practice problems, which I feel like is key no matter what, unless, you know, the topic doesn't have any practice problem, then, you know, make your own. And then afterwards, I use the mental reading and the mental reverse reading strategies as a supplement if I can't just get practice problems in. And then I also use the Feynman sort of one-page double-sided sort of review, right? Summary review, brain dump, basically. Help me organize my thought. So, wow, I talked a lot. All right, anyways, that's basically it. That's how I was studying. I'm not going to bore you guys with the details anymore. If you have any questions, definitely put it in the comments section, and I will try to clarify as much as possible. I am not an expert in any way, so if my explanation doesn't make sense, then that sucks. All right, anyways, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hopefully you find at least some part of this useful. If not, then, well, then it's not useful. And if it's useful, great. I want to hear all about it. And if you guys have any studying strategies or techniques that I never mentioned or I might not even have heard of, please share in the comment section, man. If it's amazing, I am definitely going to incorporate this. Like I said, this is completely fluid in any way. Anything that I feel like can be replaced or add on or incorporate somehow, I would definitely try to do that. And then, you know, we're all going to try to be most effective and efficient in terms of our study time because we only have a limited amount of time and we want to learn as much as we can. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next video.